following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
You're listening to the Sabrecast, brought to you by Better Live Than Dead. And now your hosts, Brayton Wilson and Ryan Wolfe.
And with that, we welcome you to the Sabrecast, brought to you by BetterLiveThanDead.com, Better Live Than Dead, whatever, and the Gear Radio Network. I clearly don't know what I'm talking about. That's great. That's a great way to start the podcast. Season 2, episode number 9, entitled Skinner's Hurt. Now what? Before we get started, though, you can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, Apple Podcasts, Bullhorn, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can also get this podcast, and also a nice little news nugget drop in the past week over on GearNetwork.com. You can now listen to all Better Live Than Dead and Gear Radio Network podcasts on the Radio.com app, which is pretty cool. With that being said, I am Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD, joined on the IndyCard Media Hotline by Brayton Wilson at BJ Wilson WGR. Brayton, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good, buddy. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Hope you had a great Christmas. And
hope you did as well.
Thank you. The best gift I can give you is that we're here to talk about the wonderfully bad Buffalo Sabres.
Wonderfully bad, huh?
Yeah, that was a mouthful for you, huh?
Just a little bit. It's still early.
It's all good. So you mentioned by the title here, or you can see by the title here, I'm sick. I've taken Dayquil, so I can't be trusted for anything that I say here. Either way. Jeff Skinner injured a couple games ago, Friday night to be exact. He suffered an upper body injury. It says he collided with David Pastrnak, but it was definitely a reverse hit, a reverse check. Excuse me. So at this point, the Buffalo Sabres lose their fifth leading scorer, 11 goals, 19 points through 39 games. Skinner's kind of struggled a little, but this season it seems like it's been a season where Jeff Skinner is quietly putting up goals. And everything behind him, all the fancy stats behind him are really showing that he actually is having a relatively good season. But now, obviously, in his absence, the Buffalo Sabres have pulled the fire alarm, and God only knows what it is that they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of respond to Jeff Skinner being out, just because there's been multiple reports over what seems like eons that the Sabres are interested in making a trade. They're looking to make a trade. They're doing this and doing that to see if they can find a way to improve the roster. And unfortunately, and it's kind of, just obvious to see that they haven't been able to do that just because that everything's so log-jammed around the league with long-term injured reserve. Teams are up against the salary cap, and it's difficult. It's difficult to make a trade or to make moves like this to help improve your roster. And unfortunately for the Sabres, they're kind of in a situation where they need to get some relief, and they need to get some help up front because they don't have the depth scoring. When their top line is going of Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, and Victor Olofsson, they're still not getting that production. And when the top line is struggling, kind of like what we saw against Boston the other night, and the other team, or the other players, the other depth players aren't scoring, this team does not score, and they can't win hockey games. So they've got to find answers and fast, because if not, this could be an ugly stretch of games. Buffalo's got some tough games coming up, starting tonight against the Bruins in Boston. Then they play Tampa Bay on New Year's Eve, and then they play something like Edmonton, St. Louis, and I can't remember who the other team is that they play right after the new year, but still tough stretch of games, and they got to find ways to win these games in order to stay in the playoff race.
Absolutely. Buffalo for a while there was holding strong throughout the month of December, despite the fact that they kind of on again. They're really on again, off again. I mean, they started off, they destroyed the Devils 7-1, lose to Calgary, get a point in Vancouver, get 2 points in Edmonton. They come home. They have that great game on national TV against the St. Louis Blues. They beat the Predators. They get a point on Long Island. And then they lose 5-3 to Toronto, 6-1 to Philadelphia. They do beat LA on that Saturday game, and then they lose to Ottawa 3-1, which that probably should have won that game. They looked lifeless there. but they lost again to Boston 3-0 when they lost Jeff Skinner. They play Boston tonight, so by the time you hear this podcast, they'll probably have already played Boston. But then, like you mentioned, Brayton, they play the Tampa Bay Lightning, who seem to be coming around. That finishes off December. Then they play Edmonton, Florida, St. Louis, Vancouver, Detroit. So Vegas, Dallas, Nashville, Ottawa, and Montreal, and a very light, because of the All-Star break, a very light January. But without Jeff Skinner, I mean, it's going to be tough. And looking at the lines here from practice, which we obviously know that those, it's like looking at the Buffalo Sabres lines in practice is literally like watching that old TV show with Drew Carey, Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's just that they're made up and they don't matter, because when the game rolls around, God only knows what's going to happen. I mean, you're looking at the lines here. You've got Victor Olofsson, Jack Eichel, and Kyle Oposo. Sure. You've got Marcus Johansson, Johan Larsson, and Sam Reinhart. Sure.
About time they put Reinhart on his own line.
That's it.
Sure.
I tweeted out that I said 15 and 23, as if I'm still apparently in my drug-induced coma last night. Forgot that Jack Eichel changed his number to 9. But you look at the third line, you've got
15, by the way.
What was that?
JSD. The JSD
Oh, yeah.
is now number 15.
Yeah, that was weird for me to see when he played in Buffalo. I was like, oh, this is kind of strange for me, but whatever.
Right.
The one thing, I mean, you've got Gergensons, Lazar, Rodriguez, and then Sherry, Asplund, and Vesey. Now, the fourth line, whatever. The third line is what worries me. And I know the Buffalo Sabres had to kind of shake it up because they're trying to spread around some wealth here. But not only, and we'll talk about Jason Botterill in a minute here, I know Ralph Kruger has been able to kind of pull some rabbits out of his hat and make things work. I know the Gergensons, Larson, and Oposo line was incredible. And it was one of the, if you look at the fancy stats, it was one of the higher rated lines in the league. They do very good with possession. They do very good shutting down the opposing line, whoever it may be that they face. And that's a great thing to have. But now you've got that spread across 3 lines. And we'll see how it works out. But I don't know if that was the right decision. But then again, at this point, like you said, Brayton, you got to split people. Like they finally split Sam Reinhart from Jack Eichel. That was probably well overdue. But when you've got things like we saw Casey Middlestat since the last time we talked, Casey Middlestat's gone on to Rochester because he's been struggling mightily for a long time. You've got guys getting hurt, as we saw with Jeff Skinner. You've got guys who are just inefficient that aren't scoring. And it comes down to it where at some point in time, it's starting to kind of bleed over to the front office where you say to yourself, you look at Buffalo's defense. They literally have 8 NHL defensemen right now. They could do without literally one pair of defensemen that they have. They practice 4 lines and they decide who they want to play when they want to play them. And then you look at Rochester as well. Now, Rochester is fantastic. They've been fantastic. Yep. You want to know why? Not only are they scoring goals, yes, but they have 4 or 5 players who right now, for any NHL team, could suit up and play 12 to 15, 16, 17 minutes a night on defense. Yep. So at some point in time, and I don't know if, and I'm kind of going off here, I apologize, Brayton, but I wonder, like we keep seeing Elliot Friedman reporting that Buffalo's doing the legwork to try to make a trade happen. I know it's difficult, like you mentioned, Brayton, with the long-term injured reserve and all that stuff, and the caps being very tight for a lot of teams. And a lot of teams these days do seem afraid to make trades that aren't around the deadline, which is whatever. But you got to be willing, I guess, put yourself out there and try to make your team better. I know it seems like to me as if Elliot Friedman is carrying the water for Jason Botterill. In saying, hey, Buffalo wants to make a trade, but no one wants to seem to pick up the phone or make the deal. Or maybe they're not trying to make a trade hard enough, and they're just putting that out there. So it's like, we want our fans to know that we're trying, despite the fact that we're doing nothing. But end of the day, I mean, I've got this really bad feeling, Brayton, that we heard about a rumored trade a while back that the Sabres could potentially be interested in acquiring Alex Galchenyuk. Well, the only way a deal like that would make sense is money for money, which would be a guy like a Zach Bogosian. So my worst nightmare and my worst fear would be the Sabres trade Bogosian for Galchenyuk. They put Galchenyuk in the top 6. They force overplay him because they want to try to make a point like, oh, we're really trying to make a difference here. And then it just hurts the Sabres further. That's what I'm worried about at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, a situation like Galchenyuk, I mean, he's had past success, but the worry is, okay, is there anything more he can give to a hockey team? And that's what he's criticized for most, is because he has played well. He has the skill to be a very good player, but the question is, can he play up to a third overall pick standard like he was picked when he was picked third overall in 2012? Now, mind you, the 2012 class is a pretty bad class as it is when you look back, but I mean, Galchenyuk is a 30-goal scorer in the past with Montreal. He went to Arizona last year and didn't put up terrible numbers, but the underlying sort of aspects to his game were kind of starting to show again. Just, hey, what more can he give you? And is he going to take that next step in his game? And he never really did. Then he gets to Pittsburgh, and right off the bat, he struggled and he got hurt. Then the question was, when is he ever going to play? Is he ever going to get in the lineup and do anything in Pittsburgh? And recently he's been in the lineup and he's done a couple of things. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have to trade out money for money there, which is even more difficult because Galchenyuk makes just under $5 million per year. And sure, you could trade Bogosian. That's 5.14 off your cap. But at the same point, what does Pittsburgh want in return? Do they want only Bogosian, or do they want an additional pick, or do they want, an additional prospect? That's something you have to think about too. And what is Jason Botterill willing to give up? Yeah, sure, he's willing to make trades to try and help the team, but at the same point, is he going to have to give up a decent prospect? Is he going to have to give up, a first round pick this year when he shouldn't be giving up first round picks? I mean, he hasn't made a move like Tim Murray where he's trading first round picks for goalies or first round picks for players that are not really a good fit for this team. But still, there's a lot of things that are a question here in this organization. And, I don't know if a trade's going to happen anytime soon. I don't know if anything's going to change with this team because of everything that's going around the NHL. And it's a little frustrating. And it kind of puts Jason Botterill in a little bit of a hot seat situation where the team kind of flounders and continues to struggle, but yet he's just sitting on his hands and he's not really able to do much. But I mean, what more can you ask of him? So it's a frustrating situation because this team desperately needs help, especially now that Jeff Skinner's out. And yeah, Jeff Skinner struggled before he was injured. He hasn't scored in 11 games. And that's not good. That's not what you want to see from a guy who just scored 40 goals last year. You need him to be able to put the puck in the net, no matter what line he's on. But at the same point, you can also point to other players. Why isn't Connor Sherry scoring more? Why aren't guys like Evan Rodriguez putting up production? Why isn't Kyle Oposo playing up to the $6 million that he has, that he's getting paid and that he was signed for? And it's not just those guys. It's a little bit of everyone in the mix, except for like Eichel and Olofsson, who have really upped their game this year. So, I mean, they need to get some more depth scoring. That's one. They need to get more consistency. That's two. And, maybe Jason Botterill does need to make that one move that can kind of change the tide a little bit. But, this team is kind of spinning its wheels right now. And unfortunately, that's going to be the situation until something does happen. And I don't know what that is that's going to get them out of that rut that they're spinning their tires in, but it is what it is right now.
I mean, I'm just really worried that they're going to end up either punting on the season and saying, we're not good enough to make a big trade or to make even a trade at all. And
right.
That's kind of what worries me is that, I know Jack Eichel's still really young and he's still in the front half of his huge contract that he has.
Yeah.
But how many times can you go put your team on the ice and think to yourself, you know what, we're giving our team the best chance to win, and we're going to really go out there and we're going to really crush, and we're going to give Jack Eichel the best chance to win. Because I mean, at this point, he's on pace to have the best season of his career. 38 games, he's got 51 points, 24 goals, 27 assists. He's a plus 12. He's shooting 17.6%. I mean, at this point, he's on pace. Let me double check here really quick. I should have done this before the podcast. This is breaking down the fourth wall. You guys know that we don't do. I don't say we. I mean me. I don't do a very good job of getting all this stuff together sometimes.
That's okay. We do it on radio too. It's all fine.
There you go. So Jack Eichel right now, thanks to ESPN.com's projected stats here, he is on pace for a career high in goals. His career high is 28. Right now he has 24, but he's projected 51. He's also on pace for 58 assists, which would be a career high. Last year, he had 54 assists. So he's on pace for 109 points, even despite the fact the Buffalo Sabres are as mediocre as they are. But as we've seen, one player can't win you everything, but having a player like Jack Eichel play to this next level where he's one of the best players in the National Hockey League right now. I mean, granted, you're not expecting him to fall off next year and score 30 points, but you can't keep taking advantage of this. You can't keep saying to yourself, well, yeah, we're bad, but next year we'll have Dylan Cousins, or next year, Dahlin will be in his third year and he'll be more developed, or Sam Reinhart will be better after another year. When does that stop? And that's what I'm wondering. Like, why is the general manager okay with being so lifeless and just saying, well, injuries suck, ho-hum, this is crappy, but hey, at least Jack Eichel's good. It's like, yeah, Jack Eichel is good. But it's kind of like, I mean, that's the one thing about Ralph Krueger that I've enjoyed so far, is that Carter Hutton had a great October and then completely fell off the map, completely fell off a cliff, I should say. And I mean, at this point, Ralph Krueger said, hey, Linus Ullmark, it's your gig. And Linus Ullmark took it and ran with it. Now, his stats haven't been great as of late because the Sabres haven't been winning a ton as of late. But Linus Ullmark definitely is the number one goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres. But at some point in time, like the coach seems to get it. That's what I'm trying to say here. He looks at it and goes, he may do some out of the ordinary things or outside the box stuff, but it seems like he's able to make the most of what he's got. And that's kind of always been what he's been lauded for before he came to Buffalo. And at this point, it just seems to me like maybe he's not getting enough, or he's not been given enough. I mean, they just, aside from that top line of Olsen, Eichel, obviously Reinhart until tonight, as we've mentioned, that's really the only line that's been performing and producing at like any sort of consistency. I mean, like you mentioned, Brayton, Jeff Skinner struggled. It seems like the team can't win faceoffs. It seems like the defense, they've got these strange pairings where they're just, it's almost like they're forced to have to play Zach Bogosian, or they're forced to have to play Marco Scandella because for some reason maybe they're trying to, I don't know, showcase them or not piss them off, even though Zach Bogosian has already been pissed off and has already requested a trade reportedly. Again, it's just, I don't know. I'm just so tired and frustrated and just downright exhausted with this hockey team. Like, you look at it, again, Jack Eichel has 51 points in 38 games. He has done what people have requested of him, saying, you know what, Jack Eichel, like last year, Jack Eichel was incredible. If Jack Eichel comes out and puts up 82 points in 77 games, that's amazing. Like, that's what all you can ask for. He's over a point a game. Great. But then we said to ourselves, well, what's going to happen when Jack Eichel takes that next step? Okay, Jack Eichel took that next step. Now, right now, Buffalo is 2 points out of third in the Atlantic Division behind Florida. Toronto has 47 points. Buffalo has 41. So Buffalo has a 6-point deficit, and Boston, there's no way they're going to catch Boston at 55 points. But then you look at the wild card. You've got Philadelphia with 47 points. You've got Carolina with 48 points. So at some point in time, it's fight or flight. You got to say, are we going to go out and make a big deal and say, you know what? Yeah, let's try to go get, I don't know, like with Taylor Hall. I don't think that the Buffalo Sabres are in a spot to get a guy like Taylor Hall, but go out and try to make a smaller deal that's going to make an impact, that's going to show this team that you're for real, that you're serious about this. Right. Because if you keep strutting out, I mean, no offense against Johan Larsson, but if you keep strutting out Johan Larsson on the second line because of necessity, you got to do something, because at that point, it just feels like the tank days where you're like, are you a warm body? Can you skate? Do you know how to back check, kind of? Okay, go play hockey. And it's like, is there any pride? Is there any, or is it just, we're just going to sit around and be lifeless and say, well, we got unlucky with injuries. There's always next year.
Yeah, I mean, and they've got to do something in that terms. But again, it's just all difficult. And there are a couple names out there that could interest the Sabres. I mean, one is Chris Kreider. He's a left winger, right winger. I think mainly left winger, but he's a guy that scored goals and has produced offense and can be a top six forward for this team. He definitely has that potential. There are plenty of other guys out there that I'm sorry that I'm not getting this off the top of my head, but I mean, there's options out there. But again, it's the players that are, okay, if you're going to make a trade for them, certainly got to make you've got to make room for them and make some sort of other move that is certainly complicating things. And I mean, this team is, just 1 point out of a playoff spot, which is great for that matter, just because it shows that they're in contention. But yeah, you pointed out the wild card teams are all from the Metropolitan Division, and they have a little bit of room on the Sabres for the wild cards. Excuse me. So you've got to find a way to get into the top three of the division to be able to get into the playoffs and make some noise. And can Buffalo do that? I just don't know, because we haven't seen the consistency from them this year. They've had stretches of 10 games where they go off and they're excellent. They're fun to watch. 10 games where they're struggling and they're a pitiful hockey team. And then they go back and forth between those two stretches. And right now they're in a stretch where they're looking like a very bad team that can't score goals. And that's not going to cut it. You have to find ways to be a consistent hockey team and be able to score and put pucks in the net and win hockey games. And just this team, again, just continues to frustrate us in that way, where they give us a glimmer of hope. Then they strike it down to earth level and kind of put us all back into, hey, this team isn't as good as we all anticipated. And then they'll go on another stretch where it's like, oh, hey, guess what? We're shooting for a playoff. We're in a good spot. And then they start struggling again. So all I care about is consistency. If they can start playing consistent hockey, even if they're not winning those hockey games, show me stretches of games where you're competitive and you're at least putting the effort in and you're getting strong efforts from the top to the bottom of your lineup and getting goals from not only Jack Eichel and Victor Olofsson and Sam Reinhart, but getting goals from like Zemgus Girgensson, Johan Larsson, Evan Rodriguez, Jimmy Vesey, those type of guys who have been struggling most of the year to put up any production. If you could do that, I think that's more positive than having the 10-game stretches where you're only getting goals from your top guys and you're getting wins, kind of pulling them out of your rear end to give yourself some false sense of hope. I just want to see them be able to look like a competent hockey team that could be contenders. And again, even if they lose some of the hockey games, but they look competitive and they're promising and they're putting up good stats and looking good with the advanced analytics and everything, sure, that's fine. I could care less at that point. But again, when it's these up and down roller coaster stretches of games with this team, it's frustrating because you don't get a good sense of where they're at and where they're going. And then you start questioning, like, hey, where's this team going to go? Why can't we make moves to make our team better? Or, what's going on? And if they can put some consistency up, I think people will start to back off, and I think they'll start to get a good picture of where we're at. And then maybe at that point, even then, it'll be more of a sense of, okay, this is where we need to improve on because we're playing consistently enough to know this is not good enough. This is not going to help us win hockey games. So let's improve this. Let's go out and acquire a player or call up somebody from Rochester that has been doing well in this specific area and go throw them out there and see what happens.
Well, it's hard too because obviously with how Rochester has been decimated by injuries, despite the fact that they're still damn good.
Yeah.
There's only, I think, 3 players left right now in Rochester that have NHL contracts. That's JSD, which I'd never realized his last name was just literally the pronunciation of the letter D. That was my exciting moment the first time he scored a goal this season. I was like, oh, helps if I pay attention, but excuse me. There's Casey Middlestat, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but there's not much down there.
On an NHL contract.
What was that? I'm sorry.
DJ Smith, hold on. I got to pull up the cap friendly Sabres.
Yeah, I'm looking right now just to verify. But there's not much down there in Rochester. And you know what is I didn't mean for this to be like bashing Jason Botterill, but looking at this point in time, I mean it blows my mind that we continually hear each week in, week out, and they always say to us, on Hockey Night in Canada, well, the Buffalo Sabres have extra defensemen. They're looking to move. It happened again last night on Saturday night. Elliot Friedman says the Sabres have extra defensemen, want to make moves. The New Jersey Devils are looking for defensemen. The Los Angeles Kings are looking to potentially make Tyler Toffoli available. Brandon Saad's apparently available. And it's like teams want defensemen, and the Sabres have defensemen. But then it seems like the Sabres don't want to trade anybody, and I don't understand that. And I get the point of I get the point of not making a trade not making a trade just to make a trade. But that being said, at this point in time, what you're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
So you have to do something to change it up.
Yep. So here's your contracted players, the NHL contract players in the AHL right now. Scott Wilson, Andrew Ogilvy, Casey Middlestat, JSD, CJ Smith, and Remy Ellie. And I think Remy Ellie is hurt down there still. And then you've still got Tage Thompson, who's on injured reserve and could be back in like a week or two, but he's still a little bit of ways. And obviously you've got Saboka and Hunwick on long-term IR. And I wouldn't expect either of those guys to play at all the rest of the season. But it's looking a little thin. And again, what you said earlier, the Amherst have some really good depth on defense in guys like Lawrence Pilot, who probably should be up in the NHL. He's been
Lawrence Pilot absolutely should be in the NHL.
He absolutely should be up here over a few guys that have struggled mightily throughout the rest of the year. You've got a guy like Will Borgen, who's a really good option down in Rochester, really solid two-way guy. Casey Nelson has been okay this year. I'm not sure if he's going to get another contract after this year. And then you've also got a guy like John Gilmore, who's performed admirably throughout this year, whether it's been here in Buffalo or in Rochester. So, the reports out there saying, the Sabres have a plethora of defensemen and they're looking to move them. Other teams need to move them. But then Jason Botterill says, I like the depth on our defense and it's important for the end of the year. Well, if you have the depth on defense at the end of the year, but you're not in a playoff picture because you're hurting in other areas, you're doing yourself no service. If you have to go out, trade a defenseman now, and get some help up front to score and be able to win more hockey games, that's the most important thing. You can't just sit on your hands and just not be looking to help your team out in any way. Because, if you like your depth on defense, but your team can't win hockey games, and you're not in the playoff picture come the trade deadline, you've wasted that opportunity. You've wasted all that time to be able to help your team, and you're not going to get yourself in a playoff picture. So I get the frustrations. It actually makes me a little frustrated now that we're talking about it. But at the same point, the teams around the NHL, the Sabres included, there's not a lot going on with cap space and with the availability to be able to trade some of these guys. And it makes it difficult because a lot of teams don't want to get robbed of a player and, don't want to help each other out, yada, yada. I'm not too familiar with how things go behind the scenes, but again, Jason Botterill doesn't have Jeff Skinner for 3 to 4 weeks, and there's people saying, well, who would want to trade with the Sabres now because, they'd be helping them out. It's just like, I don't know. Sure, that's a good point, but it's frustrating. It makes me want to rip my hair out, whatever hair's left in my head. But, I just don't know what the Sabres can do at this point. I really don't.
It just definitely seems like at the end of the day, there's a lot going against what they're trying to do, and it's frustrating because it's almost like other teams know Buffalo's now in a bad position. So then you get Jason Botterill, who clearly after the Ryan O'Reilly failed trade, granted, again, we talk about it, maybe Tage Thompson comes back and scores 15, 20 goals a season. We don't know. But right now, that was a real bad trade. We know that. It's almost like maybe he gets gun shy, and it's like when you play a video game or you play fantasy football or whatever, fantasy baseball, fantasy hockey, and then you offer Brayton, I offer you a trade, and you immediately say, sure, I'll do it. And then I go, why was there no resistance? Why did you just say, yeah? Are you trying to pull a fast one on me? And it's like, bro, you approached me about the trade. You asked me if I wanted to trade, and it's a good trade for me. And then you get all goofy, you get all I can't think what I'm trying to say here. I don't know. I can't think of the phrase I'm trying to say. But anyways, you get all boo-boo face. That's what it was. You get all boo-boo face, and then you walk away and you're like, nah, I don't want to do it now because you're trying to pull a fast one on me. And then they're like, okay.
Right.
That's kind of what it feels like to me. Maybe I'm totally misreading the tea leaves, but again, end of the day, the hell is he doing?
Yeah. Yeah, and you look at how the team has also played against some of their division rivals this year. They've looked relatively good against almost everyone else in the NHL. And you look at the division and how they've played this year. They've lost three games to Tampa Bay this year. They've lost 2 to Boston, and they've lost 2 to Toronto, and they've only gotten 1 win against those 3 teams. you have to play better against your division rivals. And especially with how the division is playing out and how the playoff picture looks right now, you've got to start winning some hockey games against your own division. So that's something you've also got to take into consideration. And it's just a situation where, again, what can the Sabres do to help? I mean, there's a couple options, but you've got to be willing to make those moves. And I just don't know if Jason Botterill does want to make those moves, or if it's a situation where he can't make those moves right now. And I don't know if anyone really knows that. I don't even know if the insiders really know that. It's just a frustrating situation that, you know, we might not all be happy about until actually finally something happens or the trade deadline passes and nothing happens, and then everyone can get really mad again.
Brayton, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
we've done this all before.
Yeah.
The Sabres will make a trade, and doesn't matter what it is, who it's for, what they got, what they spent, whatever it may be, people
Very true.
will still be pissed off about it. It's
very true.
It's just that's how it always happens, man. I mean,
Yep.
just want it. Let's just get some different bodies in here and show some life and show us that you care about this season. Because again, if not, you're wasting Jack Eichel and you're doing a disservice to this fan base.
Yeah, and it is frustrating that way too, because you look at how you look at, and we talked about this so many times, and it's just going to be brought up continuously over and over again. Don't waste Jack Eichel's prime. Don't waste Rasmus Dahlin's entry-level contract. I mean, Casey Middlestat's going to go through his entry-level contract and look like blah. It's one of those situations where I don't think he was ready to come up when he did, but I mean, it is what it is, and now you kind of got to face the music here. And you know, enough's enough. I mean, it's been long enough this decade. I mean, going through and talking about, you know, oh, what do you remember most about this decade? It's like, I just remember the tank teams. I remember how bad this organization has looked since the end of that 2013 shortened lockout season. It just has been awful to watch. It's been awful to follow. It's been awful to talk about, but yet here we are still talking about most of the same stuff.
I remember the turd burgers.
Yeah, honestly, I brought that up to my wife the other day, and she was like, turd burgers. And I'm like, you don't remember the turd burgers? She's just
go clean your mouth out.
I showed her the picture, and she's just like, oh, yeah, those atrocities.
Yeah, I remember John Scott playing, 12, 13 minutes a game.
You remember the Corey Conacher moment where he puts on John Scott's helmet?
Yep. I actually, that game I missed. I was not home, or I was doing something that day, and then I went on Twitter and saw it blew up and was like, damn, man.
Those are the cute moments of the tank. But
yeah, I remember, Corey Conacher, what was it? Linus
Omark.
Linus, I was trying to remember. Linus Omark. There's some, we should do that sometime. Then in Konopka, I remember that. Remember when that's kind of how I feel these days, where you're just like, claim a player just because we want to see a fresh face. That's how I feel about the Sabres now.
Maybe we should just have a special podcast coming up here later, next or later on this upcoming week, where we literally just recap the decade that was, and we go through just some of the best times and some of the terrible times.
I know our friends of the podcast, our Ryan Nagelhout's doing that with his tank. He did the Bills, the drought cast. He's doing the tank cast, but we could probably do something where we just look back at how miserable the last 10 years of Buffalo Sabres hockey has been.
Hell yeah. I'm totally up for talking about that.
Well, with that being said, I'm surprised my voice didn't drop out here. I appreciate you guys all tuning in. I'm going to go drink some coffee, see if I can't get my throat feeling a little better.
Maybe go drink some tea or something like that.
I thought about tea, but I really need some energy because the Dayquil's starting to kick in and it's kind of dragging me down.
Drink some tea and add a dash of 5 Hour Energy or something.
Oh, that sounds healthy. That sounds healthy as all get out right there.
It sounds good to me.
I'll tell my wife. I'm sure she'll approve of that.
Yeah, I'm sure the Pizza Queen will definitely not approve of that, and she'll be telling me.
So that's not healthy at all.
Don't hang out with that crazy guy anymore. He's giving.
That's probably why Brayton got. It's like you got a cold. That's probably why Brayton got sick, drinking 5 Hour Energy coffee.
Well, I mean, hey, listen. It has as much caffeine as a cup of coffee 5 Hour Energy do. So you're just adding a cup of coffee to a little bit of 5 Hour Energy. It's like a shot and a half of coffee in your system.
Oh boy. Well, good luck with that.
That's why I don't work at any health department there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, with that being said, again, I am at Wolf BLTD. Brayton is at BJ Wilson WGR. We appreciate you tuning in to this rant on the podcast today, and we appreciate you tuning in as always. This is and we are the Sabrecast,
and you are not, of course.
And we will catch you sometime very soon. Happy New Year to all who are listening, and we will catch you in 2020 coming up. As always, go Sabres, and thanks for tuning in.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.